Now let's continue with the second part of special senses. Now let's continue with the last special senses, which is vision. First, let's take a look on the accessory structures of the eye. Okay, so the accessory structure of the eye include the eyelid, we have eyelash, the superficial epitheliums of the eye, and also the structure that associated with the production, secretions, and removal of tears. So the eyelash is a robust hair that helps to prevent foreign matter from reaching the surface of the eye. And the eyelids, on the other hand, is actually a continuation of the skin. So the continual blinking of your eyelid will help to keep the surface of the eye lubricated, and this also helps to remove dust and debris. So next, the cornea is actually a transparent area on the anterior surface of the eye. And then we have a pupil, which is an opening at the center of the colored iris. So the light will actually enter the eye by passing through the cornea and then through the pupil. We also have what we call the lacrimal caruncle. This is actually a small reddish body at the medial angle of the eye. So this reddish body actually produces thick secretion that can cause like a gritty deposit that sometimes appear after you have a very good night's sleep. The epithelium that covering the inner surface of the eyelid and the outer surface of the eye is known as conjunctiva. So there are two conjunctiva. One is the palpebral conjunctiva, which cover the inner surface of the eyelid, and the second one is the bulbar conjunctiva, which covers the anterior eye surface. So we have also a tarsal gland that helps to keep the eyelid from sticking together. So I think you have heard about pink eye or conjunctivitis. So this is actually referred to an inflammation of the conjunctiva. So one of the most obvious sign is actually redness, and this is actually due to the dilations of the blood vessel deep to the conjunctival epithelium. So this condition may be caused by a few things. One, probably due to pathogenic infections or allergy or chemical irritations of the conjunctival surface. So the lacrimal apparatus produce, distributes, and remove tears. So tears is very important because it need to keep the conjunctival surfaces moist and clean. But the tears also important to reduce friction, can remove debris, prevent bacterial infections, and also provide nutrient and oxygen to the portions of the conjunctival epithelium. So the lacrimal gland produce about 1 ml of tears. So the lacrimal gland produce tears that help to nourish and cleanse the cornea. So the lacrimal gland also contain antibacterial enzyme lysozyme and antibodies that is important to attack any invading pathogen. So there are 10 to 12 ducts that deliver tears from the lacrimal gland to the space behind the upper eyelid. So the lacrimal puncta are the two small pores that drains the lacrimal lake, or also known as the lake of tears. And we have the lacrimal canaculi, which are the small canals that connect the lacrimal puncta to the lacrimal sac. The nasolacrimal duct begins at the inferior tip of the lacrimal sac, and then it passes through the lacrimal canal, and then to deliver the tears to the nasal cavity. So the wall of the eye has three layers, which is known as tunics. Okay, the first one is the outer fibrous layer. Okay, the second one is the vascular layer, also known as uvea, and then we have the third one, which is the inner layer, known as retina. So the outer fibrous layer of the eye consists of the cornea and also the sclera, which is the white part. So the fibrous layer, okay, is important, okay, to support and protect the eye. It also important for the attachment site for the extrinsic eye muscles, and also it contains the transparent cornea. Okay, the curvatures of the cornea actually aids in the focusing process when the light first enter through the cornea. So the vascular layer or uvea contains numerous blood vessels, okay, lymphatic vessel, and also smooth muscle. And the function of the middle layer or the uvea is for providing the route for the blood vessel and the lymphatic that supply tissues of the eye. The second one, okay, the uvea also is very important to regulate the amount of light that enter the eye. Okay, the third one is also important to secrete and reabsorb the fluid, okay, that we know as the aqueous humor that circulate within the chamber of the eye. So, and also the vascular layer is important to control the shape of the lens, which is the essential part of the focusing process. So iris is actually the color part of the eye. So it contains blood vessel and also the pigment cells, which known as melanocyte, and this melanocyte produce melanin. So people with the brown eyes have a large amount of melanin in the iris, while people with the blue eyes have less of melanin. So iris has two layers of smooth muscles. So when this smooth muscle contract, okay, they change the diameter of the pupil. Next we have the ciliary body, which is the thickened region that bulge into the interior of the eye. And the next one we have the choroid, which is the vascular layer that is covered by the sclera. So the choroid has an extensive capillary network that delivers oxygen and nutrient to the neural tissue within the neural layer. Retina is the innermost layer of the eye. So the retina consists of a thin outer layer that absorbs light, and also an inner neural layer which contains a photoreceptor which responds to light. The ciliary body and the lens divide the interior of the eye into small anterior cavity and also large posterior cavity. So the anterior cavity actually extend from the cornea to the iris. Okay, while the posterior chamber extend between the iris and the ciliary body and also the lens. So the bulk of the ciliary body consists of the ciliary muscle, which is a smooth muscular ring that projects into the interior of the eye. And then we have ciliary process, which is the full of epithelium that covering the ciliary muscles, while the ciliary zonule, which is hold the lens in position so that it allow the light pass through it. Aqueous humor is actually a fluid that circulates within the anterior cavity, passing from the posterior to the anterior chamber through the pupil. So this aqueous humor also freely diffuse through the body and across the surface of the retina, which is the area known as vitreous humor. So the functions of the aqueous humor, okay, there's four at least. So number one is a route for the nutrient and waste transport. Okay, it also forms a fluid cushion. So the pressure exerted by the aqueous humor actually helps to retain the eye shape. Okay, and the aqueous humor also is important to stabilize the positions of the retina. So the body of iris consists of highly vascular and pigmented loose connective tissue. So the anterior surface has no epithelial covering, and instead it has an incomplete layer of fibroblast and melanocyte. The ora serrata is the jagged anterior edge of the neural layer of the retina. So the eye color is determined by the genes that influence the density and the distributions of melanocyte and the density of the pigmented epithelium. So for example, a person with a green, brown or black eyes have an increasing numbers of melanocyte in the body and the surface of the iris. So in contrast, people with albinism, okay, have the eye with a very pale gray or blue gray. So the cornea allows the light to enter the eye, so its transparency and clarity are very important to the eye function. So the cornea is actually a vascular, which means it has lack blood vessel. So the superficial epithelial cells of the cornea must obtain oxygen and nutrients from the tears that flow across the free surfaces. The lens lie posterior to the cornea, and they are held in place by the ciliary zonule that originate on the ciliary body. So the primary functions of the lens is to focus the visual image on the photoreceptor, and to do this the lens will change its shape. So the sclera stabilize the shape of the eye during the eye movements. So the optic nerve, on the other hand, carries the visual information and bring it to the brain to process. So the amount of light that entering the eye and pass through the lens is actually controlled by two pupillary muscles of the iris. So when this muscle contract, they will change the diameter of the pupil. So for example, in the response of a very dim light, so the dilator pupillae will extend radially away from the edge of the pupil, and the contractions of this muscle will enlarge the pupil. In response to bright light, okay, this causes the sphincter pupillae muscle to contract, and the pupil will decrease in the diameter of the pupil. So this actually involves the parasympathetic activation. So the light passing through the center of the cornea and the center of the lens strike a specific location that contains the highest density of photoreceptor, okay, anywhere in the eye. So for example, like a macula here, okay, the visual axis of the eye is actually it's like an imaginary line that drawn from the center of an object that you are looking at, okay, and directly through the center of the cornea and the center of the lens to the retina. So the photoreceptors are located in the inner neural layer of the retina. So the type and density of the receptors actually varies from one portion of the retina to another portion. So the very highest concentrations of photoreceptor occurs at the center of an area which is known as macula. So this central area is called the fovea centralis. So the fovea centralis is the point of the sharpest vision. So for example, when you look directly at an object, so its image will fall on these portions of retina. So light is actually refracted or bent when it passes from one medium to another medium with a different density. So in the human eye, the greatest amount of refractions occurs when the light passes from the air into the cornea, which has a density close to a water. So the lens actually provide an extra refraction that is needed to focus the light rays from an object towards a focal point. So the distance between the center of the lens and its focal point is known as the focal distance of the lens. So whether in the eye or in the camera, for example, the focal distance is determined by the distance from the object to the lens and also by the shapes of the lens. So in this picture, you can see that the lights coming from external sources. For example, the object that you are looking at. So then the light will go through the lens and the lens bend the light into one focal point. In a situation where the light source is closer, the focal points become more longer. So accommodation is actually a process where the retina change the shape of the lens to keep the focal distance constant and provide us a clear vision. So for example, for a distant vision, the ciliary muscles relax and the ciliary zonule pull at the circumference of the lens, making the lens flatter and bringing the image of a distant object into focus of the retina. So for close vision, the ciliary muscle contract and the ciliary body will move towards the lens, thereby reducing the tensions in the ciliary zonule. So the elastic capsule of the lens then will pulse it into a more spherical shape, a round shape that increases the refractive power of the lens, okay, and enable it to bring light from nearby objects into focus on the retina. So the image that we see are not from a single point, okay, but it actually consists of a large number of individual points focusing on the retina. So to understand more about the image formations, so let's watch this video.
Vision is the dominant sense for most people with sight. The organ of sight is the eye. Think of it as a slightly irregular, hollow sphere that takes in light and translates it into images. If we enlarge the eye and look inside it, we can discover how that's done. Inside the eye are various structures working together to create an image the brain can understand. Among these are the cornea, a clear dome-like structure covering the iris or colored part of the eye, the lens directly below it, and the retina, which lines the back of the eye. The retina consists of thin layers of light-sensitive tissue. This candle can help us understand how the eye captures images and then sends them to the brain. First, the candlelight passes through the cornea. As it does, it's bent or refracted onto the lens. As the light passes through the lens, it's bent a second time. Finally, it arrives at the retina, where an image is formed. This double bending, though, has reversed the image and turned it upside down. If that was the end of the story, the world would always appear upside down. Fortunately, the image is turned right side up in the brain. Before that can happen, the image needs to travel as impulses along the optic nerve and enter the brain's occipital lobe. When the image forms there, it regains its proper perspective.
So the retina contains multiple layers of specialized cells, including two types of photoreceptors, which is rods and cones. So rods do not discriminate among colors of light and provide visions in black and white. So it is really highly sensitive because it allows us to see in a low light room, at twilight, also in a pale moonlight. On the other hand, cones provide us with color vision. They give us a sharper, a clear image than the rods, but cones require more intense light. Rod and cones synapse with a neuron called bipolar cells. So bipolar cells then will synapse on ganglion cells. The two color band in these illustrations of the retinal surface actually indicates the relative density of cones and rods on either side of a horizontal line passing through the fovea centralis and the optic disc of the right eye. So when you look directly at an object, the image will fall on the fovea centralis, which is the center of the color visions and image sharpness. However, in a very dim light, the cones cannot function. So, for example, you cannot see a dim star if you stare directly at it, but you can see it if you shift your gaze to one side or to the other so that the image will fall on the more sensitive rods. So the rods and cones of the retina is known as photoreceptor because they detect photon, which is the basic units of visible light. So light energy is actually a form of a radiant energy that travels in a wave with a characteristic of a wavelength. So all rods contain the same type of opsin. It is most sensitive to the blue-green wavelength of the light, and there are three types of cones. We have blue cones, green cones, and red cones. So each cone has a different form of opsin that is sensitive to a different range of wavelengths. So their stimulation in a various combination is the basic for color vision. Although their wavelength sensitive is actually overlap, each type is actually most sensitive to a specific portions of the visual spectrum. So if all three cones are stimulated, we perceive the colors as white. People who cannot distinguish certain colors have a form of color blindness. So color blindness occurs when one or more types of cones are non-functional. The cones may be absent or they may be present but unable to manufacture the necessary visual pigments. In the most common type of color blindness, such as the red-green color blindness, the red cones are missing, so the person cannot distinguish between red light from the green light. So the color blindness are most common in males when compared to female. Now let's take a look on a visual pathway. So the visual image from the left and right eyes is actually overlap, and the visual cortex of each cerebral hemisphere receive information from both eyes. So the visual pathway began at the photoreceptor in the retina. So each photoreceptor will monitor a specific receptive field of vision, and when they're simulated, they will pass the information through a bipolar cell, then to a ganglion cells. So the axon from the ganglion cells will converge on the optic disc and penetrate the wall of the eye, and then will proceed towards the diaphragm as the optic nerve 2. So the two optic nerves, one from each eye, will reach the diencephalon at the optic chiasm. So from the optic chiasm, about half of the fibers will proceed towards the lateral geniculate body of the same side of the brain, whereas the other half cross over to reach the lateral geniculate body of the opposite side. So from each lateral geniculate body, the visual information travel to the occipital cortex of the cerebral hemisphere on that particular side. So the bundle of projection fibers that link each lateral geniculate body with the visual cortex is known as the optic radiation. Next, let's take a look on a refractive problem. So the first one, which is the myopia, is actually a common vision condition in which you can see object near to you clearly, but the object far away are blurry. So it occurs when the shape of your eyes cause the light rays to bend, okay, incorrectly, which then focusing the image in front of your retina instead on your retina. So the nearsighted usually occurs when your eyeball is longer than normal or your cornea is curved too steeply. So myopia can be treated by placing a diverging lens in front of the eye. The diverging lens will have at least one concave surface that can spread the light rays apart as the object will closer to the viewer. So the second one is the hyperopia. Okay, the farsightedness is actually a common vision condition in which you can see a distant object clearly, but the objects near you may be blurry. So the farsightedness occurs when your eyeball is shorter than normal or your cornea is curved too little. So hyperopia can be corrected by placing a converging lens in the front of the eye. So the converging lens have at least one convex surface, and this provides the additional refractions that is needed to bring a nearby object into focus.
Now let's consider two common conditions that cause blurry vision. The eye's shape is important for keeping things in focus. With normal vision, light focuses precisely on the retina at a location called the focal point. But what happens if the eye is longer than normal? The longer the eye, the more distance there is between the lens and retina. But the cornea and lens still bend light the same way. That means the focal point will be somewhere in front of the retina rather than on it. This makes it difficult to see things that are far away. A person with a long eye is said to be nearsighted. Glasses with concave lenses can correct nearsightedness. The lens widens the plane of light coming through the cornea. That pushes the focal point back onto the retina. Farsightedness is just the opposite. The eye's length is too short. When that happens, the focal point is behind the retina, so it's difficult to see things that are up close. Glasses with convex lenses narrow the plane of light. Narrowing the light passing through the cornea moves the focal point back onto the retina and can correct farsightedness.
So surgical and laser procedure can be used to correct the refractive errors. So in the photorefractive keratotomy PRK, so this is actually a computer guided laser that shapes the cornea. So in this procedure, it will remove about 10 to 20 micrometer of cornea. Okay, and the entire procedure actually can be completed in less than a minute. Okay, so LASIK surgery is one of the procedure that being used to perform or to treat myopia, hyperopia, and also astigmatism. So this procedure actually utilize a highly specialized laser that is designed to treat the refractive error to improve the visions and reduce or eliminate the need for using glasses or even contact lens. So these laser procedures alter the shape of the cornea, which is the transparent front that covering the eye. So let's watch this video about how LASIK surgery is being done. So a cataract is a condition where the lens lost its transparency. Okay, so a cataract will scatter and block the light as it passes through the lens, which is preventing a sharp defined image from reaching your retina. So this is why your vision become blur. So the clouded vision caused by the cataract can actually make it more difficult for the person to read and even to drive a car. So most cataract develop when aging or injury that change the tissue that make up of your eye lens. So some inherited genetic disorders that cause other health problems can increase your risk of having cataracts. Cataracts can also be caused by other eye conditions like previous eye surgery or medical conditions such as diabetes. So long-term use of steroid medication can also cause you to develop cataracts. So this is my references, and with that, thank you for watching.